My husband called me paranoid in front of both our families while standing 3 feet away from the basement door he had spent 6 months soundproofing. He laughed, tapped his wine glass with a fork, and said, "Some women invent problems because they have nothing real to be proud of." Everyone laughed. His mother smiled at me like I was a difficult pet. What none of them knew was that the camera he forgot existed had been recording inside that room for 3 weeks. And by the end of that night, the whole family would understand exactly why he needed the walls thick enough that no one upstairs could hear a thing. Welcome back to Petty Revenge Reddit channel. Before I tell you what happened, I want to ask you something. If someone made everyone believe you were unstable, just to hide what they were doing, would you expose them quietly? Or would you let them embarrass themselves first? My name is Emma. I'm 36, and until last year, I thought my marriage was boring in the safe way. Not perfect, not romantic like movies, but stable. We paid bills, we had Sunday routines, we bought the same coffee creamer every week. My husband, Daniel, worked in commercial audio installation, and I ran a small home security business that I built from nothing. That last part is important, because Daniel loved telling people I played with cameras. That was his little joke. At dinner parties, if someone asked what I did, he would say, "She installs doorbells and scares old ladies into buying motion sensors."
His brother would laugh. His mother would say, "Well, at least she's keeping busy." Daniel made good money, or at least he looked like he did. He wore the nice watch. He drove the nice truck. He understood speakers, acoustic panels, wiring, sound systems. People thought that made him technical and serious. I was the wife with the ladder in the back of my van. The funny part was, my little camera job paid half our mortgage for 4 years. But Daniel never said that out loud. The first time I realized how small he wanted me to feel was at his parents' anniversary dinner 2 years ago. His father asked how business was, and before I could answer, Daniel put his hand on my shoulder and said, "She's still trying. You know how she gets when she wants to prove a point." Trying.
Like I was a child selling bracelets at a folding table. I remember looking around that restaurant and seeing nobody correct him. His mother just tilted her head and said, "Well, not everyone is meant for big careers." I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. That night, when we got home, I told Daniel it hurt me when he talked about my work like that. He sighed, took off his watch, and said, "You're too sensitive. I was protecting you from looking desperate." Desperate? "You brag about a business nobody understands," he said. "I make it sound cute. You should thank me." That was Daniel's talent. He could insult you and make you feel rude for noticing. Let me know in the comments, how many times does someone have to joke about disrespecting you before it stops being a joke? I didn't leave then. I wish I could say I did. But life is rarely that clean. My business was growing, but unevenly. Some months were good. Some months I was eating peanut butter toast at midnight and pretending I wasn't scared. My father had died when I was 24. My mother lived 3 states away. I didn't have a big support system, and Daniel knew that. He knew I hated conflict. He knew I would rather swallow a comment than ruin a dinner. He knew I was still trying to build something solid enough to stand on. So he kept shrinking me in public and apologizing in private, only when I cried hard enough to make him uncomfortable. Then, 6 months before everything blew up, Daniel announced he was building a studio in our basement. At first, it sounded normal. He said he wanted a quiet room to test audio equipment for clients. He said he might record training videos. He said he was tired of renting workshop space. I didn't question it. We had an unfinished basement with concrete floors, exposed beams, and a weird little storage room under the back porch. If he wanted to make it useful, fine. But then the project got strange. He insisted on doing it himself. No contractors, no friends helping, no permit, even though he was adding electrical lines. When I offered to help run cable because, again, that was literally my job, he snapped at me. "I know how wires work," he said. "I didn't say you didn't. You always do that." "Do what?" "Act like your camera thing makes you an engineer." I remember standing there with a box of groceries in my arms, feeling that familiar burn in my throat. Then he softened. He stepped closer, kissed my forehead, and said, "I just need one thing in this house that's mine." That sentence worked on me, because I thought maybe I had been too defensive. Maybe everyone needs space. Maybe he really did feel crowded. Maybe marriage meant letting your spouse have a room without needing to understand every nail in the wall. So I let it go. For months, he worked down there at night. I heard drills, staple guns, the dull thump of drywall. He ordered acoustic foam, mineral wool, extra thick door seals, rubber floor underlayment, and something called mass-loaded vinyl. The basement started smelling like adhesive and sawdust. He became protective of the space in a way that made my skin prickle. If I walked downstairs with laundry, he closed the door. If I asked to see the progress, he said, "It's a mess right now." If I joked, "What are you building, a bunker?" he didn't laugh. He just said, "Don't start." The first real red flag came from my neighbor, Marcy. Marcy was 72, widowed, blunt, and the closest thing I had to a local mother. She was also my first customer when I started my business. She used to bring me soup when Daniel was traveling and say things like, "A man who laughs at your work is afraid of what happens when you realize you're good at it." One Tuesday morning, she called while I was installing cameras at a daycare. "Sweetheart," she said, "does Daniel have a sister with red hair?" "No." "A cousin?" "No. Why?" There was a pause. "I saw a woman at your side gate yesterday. Red hair, black coat. Daniel let her in through the basement entrance." My stomach dropped so fast I had to sit down on the daycare steps. Daniel told me later she was a client, a woman who owned a dance studio and needed sound panels. "In our basement?" I asked. She wanted to see the materials. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you react like this." That was another Daniel trick. He did something suspicious, and my suspicion became the problem. If stories like this keep you watching until the truth finally comes out, make sure you're subscribed, because this one gets worse before it gets better. I tried to believe him. I really did. But then I noticed money missing. Not obvious amounts, not $5,000 at once. Smaller things. A transfer here, a cash withdrawal there, a new vendor name on his business card I didn't recognize. I asked about it once, and he said, "You wouldn't understand business expenses." That line hit differently after 8 years of him calling my business a hobby. So I did something I had never done before. I stopped asking questions and started paying attention. My business had grown enough by then that I had 2 part-time employees and a storage unit full of equipment. I installed security systems for people who had stalkers, messy divorces, employees stealing inventory, adult children draining accounts, and exes showing up at midnight. I knew the difference between paranoia and pattern recognition, and Daniel was a pattern. 3 years earlier, before the basement project, I had installed exterior cameras around our house. Daniel knew about the front porch, driveway, and garage cameras. He even bragged about them when packages arrived safely. But he forgot about one. A tiny camera under the back eave facing the basement entrance. I had installed it after someone tried to break into Marcy's shed and then never thought about it again. The system stored motion clips automatically. One night after Daniel fell asleep, I opened the app. The first clip was Daniel carrying drywall. The second was Daniel bringing in a heavy black duffel bag. The third was the red-haired woman. She looked younger than me, maybe late 20s. She walked through my side yard like she had done it before. Daniel opened the basement door from inside. She smiled. He touched her lower back. I watched that 8-second clip 12 times. Not because I needed to, because my brain refused to accept what my eyes already knew. The next clip was worse. Daniel brought in a box from a jewelry store. The next day, she came back wearing a silver bracelet I had once admired in a shop window and decided was too expensive. I didn't cry that night. I went numb. The next morning, Daniel kissed my cheek, and asked if I could pick up his dry cleaning. I said yes. Then I drove to Marcy's house and broke down in her kitchen so hard she had to hold my shoulders and tell me to breathe. When I showed her the clips, her face went cold. "Do not confront him yet," she said. "I have to." "No," she said, louder than I had ever heard her speak. "You confront a liar when you have enough truth that he can't turn it into your behavior." That sentence saved me, so I waited. I pulled more clips. I checked dates. I matched them to his bank withdrawals. I found hotel charges hidden under business travel. I found receipts from restaurants he claimed were client meetings. And then, because I knew our home network better than Daniel did, I checked the device list. There was a hidden Wi-Fi camera connected from the basement. Not mine. His. That should have made me angry. Instead, it confused me. Why would a man cheating in a basement install his own camera in the room? I didn't access it illegally. I want to be clear about that. But the camera was on our home network, under our shared internet account, using the default login because Daniel was arrogant enough to think no one else in the house understood tech. When I opened the feed, the basement room appeared in gray silence. The walls were covered in black acoustic foam. The ceiling had thick panels. There was a desk, 2 monitors, a sofa, a mini fridge, and a locked cabinet. At first, I thought I was about to watch proof of an affair. I did see that, but I also saw something worse. Daniel and the red-haired woman weren't just kissing down there. They were talking for hours, planning. The camera didn't record audio at first, but one monitor reflected enough for me to see documents. My name, my business name, a spreadsheet of clients, a folder labeled Asset Transfer, another labeled Capacity Concerns. I remember whispering, "What are you doing?" A week later, I got my answer. Daniel had been building a case that I was mentally unstable. He had screenshots of texts where he had cropped out his insults and kept my emotional responses. He had videos of me crying after arguments, recorded without context. He had notes about my obsessive surveillance habits. He had printed copies of my camera invoices, circling equipment purchases like they were evidence of delusion. And in that sealed basement room, where no one upstairs could hear, he and the red-haired woman rehearsed a story. She wasn't just his mistress. She was a paralegal at a small firm that handled business dissolutions and marital property disputes. Her name was Kayla. Daniel was planning to divorce me, claim I was unstable, push for the house, and argue that my business assets were marital property he had helped manage. He wanted my client list, my equipment, my contracts, my reputation. The affair hurt, but the plan made me cold. Be honest in the comments. Would you have confronted him the second you found out? Or would you have waited until you had every piece of evidence? I waited. Not because I was strong every minute. Some nights, I sat in my van outside a gas station and shook so badly I couldn't drive. Some mornings, I looked at Daniel making coffee in our kitchen and felt like I was watching a stranger wear my husband's face. But I waited because Marcy was right. I called a lawyer. Then I called a forensic IT specialist I trusted from a past client job. Then I moved every business account Daniel had ever had access to into tighter permissions. I changed passwords. I backed up contracts. I notified my accountant. I documented everything. Daniel noticed the shift in me. He became sweeter. That was the scariest part. He bought flowers. He told me I looked tired. He said maybe we should take a weekend trip. His mother called and invited us to a family dinner because Daniel had told everyone I was going through one of my moods and needed support. Support. That dinner became the stage. Daniel's parents were selling their lake house, and the whole family gathered for what they called a farewell dinner. In reality, it was a performance. Daniel wanted both families in one room before he filed. He wanted witnesses to my supposed instability. I know that because I watched him and Kayla discuss it in the basement. She'll react, Kayla said on the silent feed, her lips easy to read after I had replayed it enough times. You just stay calm. Let her look crazy. Daniel smiled and nodded. She always does. The dinner was at his parents' house, with 22 people packed into the dining room. His mother had printed old family photos and arranged them near the dessert table. His brother made jokes. His cousins drank too loudly. Kayla wasn't there, of course. She was the hidden weapon he thought I didn't know about. I arrived in a simple black dress with a folder in my bag and my lawyer sitting in his car 2 blocks away. Marcy offered to come with me. I told her no. She squeezed my hand and said, "Then remember this. Calm is not weakness. Calm is control." For the first hour, I barely spoke. Daniel watched me like he was waiting for a storm. Then his mother started. She put her hand over mine at the table and said, "We all know marriage can be hard when one person is fragile." The room went quiet in that fake way people pretend not to listen. I looked at her. Fragile? She smiled sadly. Honey, Daniel has carried a lot. Daniel lowered his eyes like a humble saint. His brother said, "Man deserved the medal." A few people laughed. Then Daniel stood with his glass. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight," he began, which meant he had planned every word. "But I want to thank my family for standing by me during a difficult season. Sometimes you love someone, and they repay that love with suspicion, accusations, cameras, and control." My heart started pounding. He looked directly at me. "I just hope one day she gets help." There it was. The room turned toward me. His mother whispered, "Don't make a scene." And something inside me settled, not broke, settled. I stood up slowly. "I won't." Daniel blinked. I reached into my bag and took out the folder. He almost smiled, like he thought this was exactly what he wanted. The unstable wife with paperwork, the paranoid woman with proof no one asked for. I placed the first photo on the table. It was a still image of Kayla entering our basement. Daniel's smile disappeared. His mother leaned forward. "Who is that?" I placed the second photo down, Daniel touching Kayla's back. The third, the jewelry box. The fourth, Kayla kissing him at the basement door. Someone at the far end of the table whispered, "Oh my God." Daniel's face went red, then pale. "This is exactly what I mean," he said quickly. "She monitors me. She spies. She's been sick for months." I nodded. That was the story, wasn't it? He pointed at me. "You need help." "No," I said. "I needed a lawyer." The room went so silent, I could hear the refrigerator humming. I opened the folder wider. "Your son built a soundproof room in our basement, not for audio work, not for clients. He built it so he could meet his mistress and plan how to take my business while convincing all of you I was unstable." Daniel slammed his glass down. "Stop lying!" So I took out the transcript, not of private audio, of screen recordings, documents, network logs, bank records, attorney-reviewed evidence, and the default camera feed he installed himself on our shared home network. I looked at his mother. He used the word fragile because that's the word Kayla told him to use. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Daniel lunged for the folder. I stepped back, and the front doorbell rang. His father, confused and shaking, went to answer it. My lawyer walked in. Not dramatic, not loud, just a middle-aged woman in a navy coat holding a sealed envelope. Daniel stared at her like she was a ghost. She handed me the envelope and said, "Everything has been filed. He can communicate through counsel from this point forward." I looked at Daniel. "You called me paranoid while using my work, my equipment, my home, and my reputation as the foundation for your lies." He whispered, "You're insane." "Now," I said, "I'm the woman who installs cameras for a living. You just forgot to respect that." His brother pushed his chair back. "Danny, what is she talking about?" Daniel didn't answer, so I did. I explained the withdrawals, the affair, Kayla's job, the plan to claim I was unstable. The attempt to argue my business was half his because he had supported me, even though he had mocked it for years. Then I said the line I had practiced only once because it hurt too much. "You didn't lose me because I found out about her. You lost me because you tried to turn my survival into evidence against me." His mother started crying. At first, I thought she was crying for me. Then she looked at Daniel and said, "How could you embarrass this family like this?" Not hurt me, embarrass the family. That told me everything I needed to know. Daniel tried to recover. He said I had misunderstood. He said Kayla manipulated him. He said the documents were just ideas. He said men make mistakes when they feel unappreciated. I almost laughed. "You felt unappreciated," I said, "so you built a padded room to destroy my life." Nobody laughed then. His father sat down heavily. His brother wouldn't look at him. One cousin quietly got up and left the table. And Daniel, the man who had spent years making me look small, looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Not because I screamed, because I didn't have to. The immediate aftermath was not clean. It never is. Daniel followed me outside, begging in a whisper because he still cared more about who could hear him than what he had done. "Please," he said, "we can talk at home." "No." "You're really going to throw away 8 years?" I turned around. "No, Daniel, you threw them away, one lie at a time. I just found the receipt." He cried then, actual tears. Maybe fear, maybe shame. Maybe the sudden realization that I was no longer isolated enough to control. I didn't comfort him. That was new for me. A week later, Kayla lost her job. Not because I made threats, but because my attorney sent evidence to the appropriate people. Daniel tried to fight the divorce aggressively at first, but evidence has a way of making confidence expensive. The basement room was dismantled before the house was sold. I kept one square of black acoustic foam, not as a trophy, as a reminder. Silence can hide cruelty, but it can also teach you how to listen closely. Daniel's mother called me 3 months later. She said, "I'm sorry for how things turned out." I asked, "Are you sorry for what he did, or sorry people know?" She didn't answer, so I said goodbye and blocked her. If someone only respects you after they find out what you're worth, do they deserve a second chance? I'm not fully healed. I still jump when a man lowers his voice too calmly. I still over-explain myself sometimes. I still have days where I wonder how I lived beside someone who was studying my pain like a strategy. But my business is still mine. My home is quiet now in a way that feels honest. Marcy still comes over for coffee, and sometimes she points at the little cameras on my workbench and says, "Best hobby you ever had." If you've ever had to walk away from people who only loved you when you were useful, leave a comment. Someone reading it might need to know they are not wrong for choosing peace. Because I didn't destroy my marriage by finding the truth. I saved myself by finally believing what the truth had been trying to show me.